Present.
Kathy Schoen,
I'm here.
Counselor Brevik,
Present.
Anna Devlin Gauthier,
Present.
Thomas Porter,
Present.
and I'm not sure, do I have to call on you, Sean, also?
No.
And then I do see Tanya. I don't know if we need to make sure that she can be heard as well.
Is she the note taker?
Tanya is our new comptroller.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay. Thank
Con-
you. Okay, so our first order of business for today's meeting will be the election of our chair and vice chair. And so under the town council rules of procedure, the president or vice president will preside until the chair is elected. And so I would like to open the floor for nominees for chair. And if those who are nominated accept the nominations, we will then move forward to statements. Lynn?
I nominate Kathy Shane.
Thank you. Kathy, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay, Kathy, would you like to make a statement?
Yes, I'll just make it briefly. Thank you very much for the nomination. I have, this will be my second year chairing. And what I'm hoping is as we go into this, I can impart any knowledge I have to new members so that with the goal of rotating the chair over time. And so I appreciate being able to continue since a lot of the coming up year feels like a continuation of last year.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. And seeing that there are no other nominations, I will close the floor for nominations and we will go use roll call for vote. So please indicate whether you are a yes or a no or an abstain at that time. I will start with Lynn Greismer,
Yes.
Sam McLeod,
Yes.
Kathy Schoen,
Yes,
Counselor Brevik,
Yes.
Anna Devlin Gauthier,
Yes.
Thomas Porter.
Yes, I support.
Okay, great. So congratulations, Kathy.
Thank you.
You have been elected. And I believe at this time I can now pass the meeting over to you for the election of the vice chair.
thank you, Counselor Walker. Well done. So we are now open for nominations for vice chair. And if I look for hands, then seeing no hands, I don't know.
I'd like to nominate Counselor Brevik as vice chair.
Okay,
Kathy,
and-
can you also explain the role of vice chair as well, just because it's the first meeting?
Sure. So the role of vice chair is to chair when the chairperson is not there. And that has happened periodically. And then the second role is it's varied throughout the years. But sometimes the role of vice chair has also been to approve minutes that have been taken during, and we'll talk about the way we do minutes on finance. Sometimes that is approval of the vice chair. So the note taker does the minutes and then the vice chair would read them. And the vice chair, when we're writing a report, we can't write them as a team, but the vice chair often provides extensive comments, sometimes authors a report, and usually if the vice chair is going to do the report, the chair just says, you're doing this report. So I had experience in my first year on the committee writing a report because the chair asked me to, as an example, why don't you do this one? So I would like to nominate Lynn Griesmer. And I guess I need to accept both. So I think we already did. Jill Brevik, do you accept the nomination? And then Lynn, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I'd accept.
Yes.
So would either of you two like to make a statement before we put it open to a vote?
I'm happy to make a statement. It's not something I was expecting, but I do, Kathy and I have met several times already, and I do appreciate her willingness to kind of help to pass the torch and educate me on matters related to Finance Committee and the budget in general. I have a lot of experience in this area professionally, so it's an area that I definitely over time hope to really sink myself into on the council. Being new, I do understand if a different direction is preferred by this committee, but it is something that I think I would be excited about and be willing to do, and would definitely commit to the work involved.
Lynn, would you like to make a statement?
First of all, I really want to thank Kathy for her willingness to chair this committee again. While Anna and I have both been on the Finance Committee in the past, neither of us were on at least last year and maybe even the year before. So I think it's really important and gracious of Kathy to be willing to tutor us all as we go forward. As I mentioned, I was on the Finance Committee for 5 years. As with Councilor Breivik, I actually, when I am with nonprofits that I'm on boards of, et cetera, I tend to be around finance and investment. So it is an area that is always been an area of strength that I bring to both the council and other organizations. Thank you.
So with that done, I will do a roll call vote, and this is just name the person that you are voting for vice president with, one is Lynn Griesmer and one is Counselor Breivik. Those are our choices. So the way I do it is I don't keep a list of people by alphabet. So I just look at the faces on the screen as I see them, and I go through the faces to make sure I don't miss anybody. So Lynn is the first on my screen. Lynn.
Lynn Griesmer.
Kathy is for Griesmer. Sam.
Lynn Griesmer.
Jill, Counselor Breivik.
Counselor Breivik.
And Anna Devlin Gothier.
Counselor Breivik.
And Tom Porter indicates support or not support by person's name.
Support for Lynn Griesmer.
So my count is 3-2. So Lynn is the vice chair for the coming year. And these are just 1 year, so everyone understands that. And I just want to assure particularly Jill and Sam, who are new to the committee, there is lots of opportunity to substantively, no report gets written without a lot of input from the whole committee, including back and forth. We review it sometimes, depending on the reports, multiple times. So with that, Councilor Walker.
Thank you, Kathy. I just wanted to congratulate both you and Lynn on your elections, and I hope you all have a great rest of your first meeting.
Thank you, and thank you for opening it for us. I mean, I assume no, you can stay or not stay as you want. So in terms of organization, this first agenda was posted with the president of the council suggesting pieces, and I'm not remembering the exact order because I didn't post it. So I know Sean, you have it, or Lynn has it in terms of someone pulling it up. So we just know the order at which we're going through the items that are on the agenda. I can look it up too.
Yeah, Lynn, do you have, if I have the guidelines, but if you have, I can pull up the agenda if you don't have it handy. You're muted.
First, and then go to pull it up.
So the next public comment is your next item,
Yes.
and then schedule.
So which is the first item?
Public
Public
comment is
comment.
your next item.
Yeah, no, that it has been our practice in finance is to do public comments at the beginning. That is a decision we can make as a committee, but right now it's always at the beginning. So, I see we've got 4 attendees. If anyone would like to make a comment, we welcome comments now, and just raise your hand. These will be up to 3 minutes, and we won't interact, but we will listen. So raise your hand if you would like to make a comment. I am not seeing any hands, so I will close public comment and note that there were none today. So the next item, as Sean had just said, is the regular meeting schedule, and it's been posted in the packet. And what you'll see that Sean has done is once we'd agreed to the first Tuesday at the first and third Tuesday of every month, there is now a schedule that has the first and third Tuesday by the actual dates, and that is downloadable from our website. So as you'll see, it's just a regular first and third. The one thing I wanted to just bring to people's attention is during May, first and third is not happening. It's every week in the month of May. And typically, or at least the last several years, it's been twice a week during those weeks. So as you can see, what this is, Sean has put it up as a draft, but it's every Tuesday. And we agreed by email, and I just want to make sure that's still okay with people, that the meeting will start at 1. So it goes from 1 to 2 is the schedule. So that'll be the regular meeting schedule. What we have done in the month of May is pick another day of the week for a second meeting. And we've done this interactively with making sure once we know, so we've done it. We typically had a Thursday, but what one of the issues has been is people are on the council or on other meetings. And so we tried to avoid, if they're on GOL or if they're on TOSO or CRC, avoid a conflict with another. So we haven't always met in the afternoon. Sometimes we've met in the morning. And I see that Anna's hand is up and Lynn's hand is up about the schedule. Anna.
So Kathy, I think I have a slight wrench here that's more of a question. One of the questions that I've had when I served on finance before was that by the time we're hearing these departmental, so the reason for those every week meetings in May is that we're hearing from the different departments about their budget requests. And it really is, it's in my experience is really an overview of what's in the budget for them for this year. And serves as a good introduction for their budgetary needs to the finance committee. My question is whether I've been questioning for a while whether May is the right time for that to happen, because at that point we've already gotten the draft budget. And so it's a challenge to hear it and not see it as, for me, to not just see it as a rubber stamp and kind of a formality. I really like hearing from those departments, but I would like to raise the question here as to whether May is the right time in the budget process for us to hear from those departments about their needs, or whether it would be better served elsewhere or in a different format, given the intensity of that month for the committee.
And I think we can take that up at the next meeting, maybe, Anna, on what might be possible. So for everyone who's new to the committee, for the town budget items, not the schools, but for the town budget items, the beginning of May is the first time we see them. We have seen regional, we meaning anyone who's looking, has seen regional and has seen, and it's the first time we see library, although library's finished a bit before too. So there are 3 budgets that are final from those committees before they get to us. And then for the town items, we're restricted to, we can make cuts, but we can't move money around. So any earlier discussion would be mainly on, hearing some of what we hear during May, which is we're short on this money. This is what we can't do with these budgets. So trying to figure out if there's any possibility of doing some of that in April would be the question you're asking, Anna, before it's totally final. And I think you're talking about mainly the town budget, but the regional school, last year we took up the regional school debt capital early, and we talked about assessment method early before it ever got to May. So we did some of it, but not all of it was done during the May month.
Yeah,
So
to-
I'm gonna go to Lynn and then come back to you, Anna. Okay, just on it, trying to
I just
think
wanted,
this through.
I'll just clarify it.
My only comment is that as much as I don't cherish evening meetings, I think for the purposes of the public, as we look at May, we might want to consider that second meeting on an evening, and particularly for those departments that we think the public is most interested in. Thank you.
Okay, so that would be whether the second meeting, and some of that, Lynn, is also staff time. Because if it's in the evening, when they wouldn't be working, and then worrying about things like school committee meetings and other committee meetings, a lot of, so, but I heard that. So Anna, coming back to you.
Thank you. So it could be April, Kathy, but I'm wondering if it's more beneficial for this committee to hear from those departments as we're going into budget guidelines instead, as we think about how folks are planning for the year ahead. I think either one could be beneficial, but I would love for us to possibly at the next meeting have that conversation of when is the best time for us to hear from the departments, whether it's when we're crafting the guidelines, whether it's once we have a draft budget, and what the intention and purpose of those meetings are. So that perhaps we could focus them a bit better. I think
Okay.
I want to make the best use of the staff's time and our
Okay,
time, but
so I think we'll leave May. We can yellow shade May on the second days and times. And then the other thing, Anna, is in our guidelines, which is another piece that's on today's agenda, is we set up a mid-February date to revisit the guidelines in terms of the financial status of the town, which is where we will hear some of that information on what does 3.5% mean for the various pieces, including the town. And it's the major departments in the town budget that are going to feel, we've got some one-person departments, for example, but, I'm talking about struggling the effort with an 18% insurance increase. So it may be that some of that is going to happen naturally in the course of Paul and Sean figuring out how we have that the midpoint discussion, so our next meeting is February 3rd. And so I think we could take this down for now, Sean, but this is a potential discussion on the meeting schedule when we're reviewing budget items there. But I think for February 3rd, if I'm correct, but you had told us in the fall that you thought certified free cash, the closing out of FY25 would be ready by end of January, early February. So is that something that's going to be ready by February 3rd?
Yep, it's certified. It's all done.
Okay,
Yep.
so that will be a February if it's this gets referred to us, so I assume it first goes to the council and then gets referred, but we're meeting the day after.
What part?
Pardon?
I'm sorry, what are you referencing goes to the council?
The certified free cash and any recommendations.
Yeah, so our plan is to bring that to the council in February. I'm not sure exactly what date, but we'll bring that to the council and then it'll get referred back to finance committee. But Paul's working through the different agendas and we're not, some of
Okay.
it's typical transfers that we do every year, and then some of it's planning for roads and things like that. So I'll defer to Paul in terms of what meeting that'll come up.
We'll have
Okay.
agenda setting next week and we'll have a better idea at that point when those are coming.
Okay, so Jill, Councillor Brevick, I'm not going to be good about Councillor Brevick, so just correct me when I forget. So did your hand go back down?
That's okay. I had a couple just to try to follow along in the conversation, just making sure I understand. But going back a second, you said there was a certain date that we were going to be possibly reopening the budget or allowing an opportunity to reopen the budget priorities. Can you just repeat what date you said for that?
It's in the guidelines, so we can bring open that document, but we said by mid-February. And it
Okay.
was a revisiting what the revenue situation is. So in the past several years, once more was known about the current year budget and what more was known about the state budget, there sometimes has been revenue enhancement. And so it's coming back, and it's also hearing from, getting a better idea of what the 3.5% means for different departments across the board, whether, whoever it is. So given that we've got an 18% health insurance piece, that the squeeze on the town. So it's having a discussion. It's not necessarily, last year, we were able to go a bit higher than the initial we were at 3%. We're able to go higher. We were at 3.5%. So it's that kind of midpoint piece. And I see Sean is up on it. So it's not revisiting them all together, but it's revisiting particularly the revenue picture.
Can I add to that,
Yeah.
Kathy? So things that were not a part of our initial projections are state aid increases. So we're going to get the governor's budget in January. So when we bring it back, update our revenue projections and present those to you in February, it'll it'll reflect the governor's budget and changes to state aid. And then we'll have more information on our premium increase for health insurance. That won't necessarily impact the numbers and the projections because they're projected at sort of overall levels, but it might impact what type of financial situation we're looking at. So we'll share that with you. And then we'll also take a look at all of our revenues and just see if we're, where we want to be in terms of projecting them. So yeah, we have that plan for mid-February. And then the other thing for mid-February that department heads are working on now is that there was a request to share with this committee what it would look like if every department of the town developed a level services budget. So typically in the past, we've built our budgets to get to a number that can be supported. But there was a request that what would it look like to fully level fund them and not rely on vacancy savings or savings in other areas, basically to cover different types of expenses. So department heads are working on that right now, and we've asked them to get that back to us by early February so we can have that information too.
And Sean, the guideline one was actually a bit narrow, but we might not have written as precisely. There had been a flat line for non-personnel expenses in the past budgets. Just have been really literally the same dollar amount year after year, and they were able
Yep.
to finance the overflow of that because there were vacancies. So it wasn't. But anyway, you all will. So that's what the reporting back was, Jill. Since when we're looking at it in November, we're missing pieces of information. They're still best guesses. Lynn.
Are we moving to a discussion of the guidelines?
Yeah, I would like to, at this point, move to a discussion of the guidelines and just to both explain what they are, but also highlight a few of the pieces. And if that's okay
Kathy,
with
are you not asking the committee to vote on a schedule at the moment?
Well, okay. The committee was polled, and I think we all agreed a 1:00 meeting 1st and 3rd February. So if we want to do that formally, and that the issue of May right now is open. So if I need to take a vote on it, is everyone comfortable with or agree to that we're going to be meeting the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of every month at 1:00 for a scheduled 2-hour meeting? And I'll just go around and get a formal approval. Lynn?
Aye.
Kathy's a yes. Jill?
Yes.
Anna?
Aye.
Tom?
Yes, comfortable.
And Sam?
Yes.
Great, thank you. And so we'll just leave those additional meetings in May or whenever you decide to schedule them as TBD. Is that correct?
Right, and what I think Sean just very quickly did is he just yellow shaded them, that it's up at top, it can say the, up at top, it can
I
say.
put the calendar together and shaded.
Yep.
No, so,
Yeah.
so up at
It was
top, it can
Lynn or
say,
Athena that did that. Yep.
no, so Athena, when you do it, it could say regular meetings will be 1 to 3, and then the other dates that are in there is a TBD.
Okay,
Is
great.
a way to think about it, because, so it's the first and third, and then the rest of it becomes, I'm assuming we're gonna have to meet every week, but in any case, is that okay, the way we're doing it?
That's just fine. I just wanted to make sure that this was final so I can post it and share it with others. So thank you.
That's great. And just so people know, on the schedule, last year, when the fall came, we had to add another day to get guidelines done in time, because things were coming in bunches. So this is the world as we know it right now. Okay, Lynn, so I think moving on to the guidelines, I, I'm hoping everyone has seen them, and if not, Lynn can put them up on the screen. But I wanted to do a brief, what are the guidelines and what are some of the highlights in them? So if we put it up on the screen, I can just do a really quick summary of what's in it with one particular item that we have more information on now. So Lynn, do you have it, or Sean, do one of you want to pull it up on the screen? Screen, anyone who wants to pull it up. I
Lynn,
don't.
do you want me to go ahead and do it? I think she said yes.
I can do it, Sean.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Mm.
So in the guidelines, we, at the point the Finance Committee is doing guidelines, we've had projections from the Finance Department of what revenues we will have available for the coming year, based on best guesses and experience on the revenue side, and taking the actual departments and looking at what those costs will be. And so we've got the very back of this guidelines has the projections we were given by the Finance Department. And looking at that, the estimate was that we could enable a 3.5% increase in all the major budgets. And 3.5% for the town is about 2.6 million on our budget of, and this is not, and this is not the enterprise funds. They operate underneath their own revenue and expenditure side. So our basic 2.7 million, sorry, not 2.6 million increase. So that's the budget that we're working with. Unless revenues increase, that's how much we're expecting to get more in the year. And this is the year that starts in July of this year, July 2026, and goes to June. So we said, don't consider an override. Don't take on any new initiatives. Try to worry about fire and EMS with staffing. Then on revenue, adjust this is the part we've talked about, adjust as more information becomes available. On expense, Lynn, you want to go to the next slide? So we went for all major funding areas getting the same 3.5%. And the elementary school was left with the year before we had done a one-time increase, pulled money out of free cash, and the recommendation that we had at the time we were working with the fall is to not include that in the base, which is what the projections do, but that we also left it that we would come back and revisit that when we had more information on the sixth grade move. In terms of the cost, the assumption had been there would be savings as we went from 3 to 2 elementary schools, and so far that has become increasingly unlikely. So there is something called other post-employment benefits. We opted to keep it at the same level, 600,000. That had been scheduled to increase every year until we got fully funded. We will get to fully funded in pensions in the next several years, and then Sean can give me a date. But one of the things we were warned when we did this is under the assumption that when we got fully funded pension, we would turn to OPEB or other employees and start enhancing it, because our bond ratings and our bond raters look at that. They want to know that we've been funded. So those are some of the main pieces. And this was the adjust if we know more in the mid-year. So on the capital budget, we actually gave the town a range of 10% and up to 10.5%. And this is a percentage of last year's, the past year's property tax revenue that gets set aside for capital. And capital is anything that's more than $10,000. And that comes from the elementary school, all the departments put that together, and it goes through JCPC, a process where Sean works with all of them and brings the proposals, and there's a certain amount of money available. This is also the money that pays for debt and interest payments on any past bond that we've used. So for example, we did a ladder truck and we had to finance it with interest. So the capital budget has to do all of that as well. We asked for road and sidewalk, that we would have a plan and we would start counting the Chapter 90 fund, which is state money for roads, sidewalks, related issues, and that we would really take a hard look at that to get to more adequate funding of it. And so then there is one item in here under the capital budget, and it was also in context of free cash, that when we voted to do the middle school roof, and the town allocated money for the roof, as did the other three towns, we knew that the auditorium roof had not been included in the roof repair, because MSBA only wanted to do roofs that were more than 25 years old, but that we were aware that the auditorium roof was in very poor repair and that it would make more sense to do them both at the same time. And this would be going out in the spring for bids for the construction. So we left open the possibility that we, the Amherst, would be welcoming a proposal for the middle school roof. And I want to come back to that when we finish going through this. So then on budget surpluses, when this is the certified free cash, so Sean, when you think about when you plan on doing it with Mandy, I think it would be better if we could have this on February 3rd, which means council on the 2nd. But once we get certified free cash from the year before, there's a set of decisions on whether we're spending any of it. So part of that is getting to free cash at 5%, where we drew down on some of that a year ago for banks. So getting it back up to 5%, maintaining a general stabilization fund at 10%. Then we have a capital stabilization fund that was set up for large capital projects. And I'm seeing that we're jumping around a little bit, so that was where in the past, when we're allocating free cash, to the extent it's above that 5% and 10%, and cannabis revenues, all the marijuana revenues go into the reparation fund. So some of the free cash money is allocated already. So to the extent there is more, we talked about roads as having a claim on it, and we didn't speak to much else in the guidelines other than putting it into the capital budget, into the capital stabilization fund. At the same time, you have to read both of these interactively on the capital budget and budget surpluses, because there is a DPW, a building committee meeting, and the capital stabilization fund has been specifically put aside because we know we need to rebuild entirely the DPW building, and we need a new fire station. So we've been building up funds, and the hope is we would be able to start drawing on some of those funds in this next fiscal year. And it's not clear yet, but that money could be moved into the capital budget. So that's the high level in this executive summary. So the that I wanted to, and I'll take any questions on this, and I'd be happy to talk more to offline to anyone where this isn't clear. This sets the stage for all the departments. So what the town has been working with now is each department, what does it mean? Total town budget at 3.5, and with the total town budget, it means the whole thing has to come in at 3.5. So one piece might be a little under and one might be a little over, but everything has to come in at 3.5. And the town budget carries, in health insurance, it carries about 2.5 million of health insurance for the schools, for the elementary schools. So when we say 18%, that's for town employees and for elementary school non-teaching staff in the health insurance line. So our budget, the town's budget, is carrying some of the school budget that doesn't show up in the elementary school budget. So the one thing that is new news on those guidelines is the regional school committee met last week to talk about the auditorium roof, and for the first time had an estimate of what that roof repair would cost and what condition it was in. And the facilities person was there talking about visible leaks, like drops of water coming through the roof, and that they're spending money each year with patchwork repairs out of the operating budget. So he was saying the roof is in basically really bad shape. The other 3 towns were stretched, particularly 2 of them were really stretched to meet their share of the rest of the roof, which was an $11 million. So it's a $1.6 million estimate for the auditorium roof. And the schedule that's in the packet here that Shannon put together noted that if we're going to do it on the same cycle as the rest of the roof, there has to be action fairly soon. So if it was shared among all the towns, Amherst share would be about 1.2, a little over 1.2 of the 1.6, but it would need to happen fairly soon so that it could go out to bid and be in line to be bidded at the same time the rest of the roof was bid. So the idea would be that the construction people come out and set up once and do the roof. So I wanted to bring this to the committee's attention because the timeline means that we, Amherst, will have to consider whether we want to do anything more on this. One year, several years ago, Sean brought to us putting another $1 million into a regional program. It was the track and field because it was clear they were going to be coming up short. So we have in the past used free cash to spend on a middle school or regional school project. So this is a slightly different context. And I just wanted to say that's the one thing that there's new information on of the guidelines. Sean.
Yeah, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the committee decided not to request the funds of the towns.
They said to take no action now. Exactly.
Right. So I think the challenging part is it's a regional building. So all 4 towns bear responsibility in supporting the facility needs of the building. And in order for the smaller towns to approve this, they would have to call, in order for them to use free cash to approve this, they would need to call special town meetings. And so we'll know if the other towns call special town meetings, but I'm guessing they're not going to if the regional committee took no action.
So Sean, what if the council in the town of Amherst decided we'd fund the whole thing without asking the other towns to do their share and said we want to, there's an interest in making the building hold and that auditorium is a general use as our other parts of the, how would that process have to flow through?
Yeah, last time you'd have to have a conversation with the regional school committee, and I think we entered into a memorandum of understanding last time around with the regional schools around the track and field. The one thing I'll just restate, because Kathy and I don't necessarily agree on this point, is that the MSBA is typically the mechanism with which roofs are replaced and the roofs are replaced in the state. And so by doing it without MSBA support, it would essentially double the cost, right? The MSBA would cover somewhere between 50 to 60% of the cost of this roof, if not a little more. But if we do this without MSBA support, then the whole cost would be on the have 4 towns, and if we do it all ourselves, then it would all be on Amherst. So it'd be taking on a significant new financial obligation.
So just one piece of information on that, Sean. We had an estimate for the middle school roof of 3 million when we got into the queue for MSBA. And first we had to get into the queue, then we had to get right to the top. By the time we got to the top, which was about 5 years later, it was 11 million. So it's not clear to me that MSBA would move quickly on this. Is the only thing I want to say, that it's only double the cost if MSBA acted quickly. It's not necessarily double the cost if we have to wait for a long time. That's the uncertainty on.
Yeah, we went through a period of rapid escalation, inflation, which could happen again. Yep, you're right.
Okay, Lynn, and then I see Lynn, and then Councillor Brevick.
Why don't you let Councillor Brevick go first, and then I have a
Okay,
couple.
Councillor Brevick.
I just had a very small point too, just to add, that it's also important to take into account the maintenance costs too, as was raised at the last school committee meeting. So in addition to thinking about that, a grant may not happen for a period of time. What are we paying, what's the differential in expenses versus savings?
So I see Lynn's hand is up and Anna's hand is up.
No, let me just go with a couple questions or observations. One is, for those of us that have been in that auditorium recently, it's scary. And there's no other word. When you're looking up and you're seeing tiles that have fallen down because of being wet, it's scary. So that's one piece. There was a decision made by the school committee, regional school committee, and it has been, if I'm correct, endorsed through the state, that now that we are going to do this roof, we have some level of commitment to maintain the building as a school for some period of time. They've been a little vague, but usually it's 10 years, sometimes 20 years. And so it has to be maintained for the purposes of education, etc., versus a cost saving of whether or not we would close it. But the school committee has made the decision to go ahead and therefore accept the grant to repair the roof, except for the auditorium. But my question is, either in the cost that we've seen for both the middle school roof, not including the auditorium, and the cost that we've seen for the auditorium, are both of these roofs solar ready? Because I believe that as a standard for at least the town, that's what we now try to make sure is that they're solar ready, meaning they can hold solar panels. And I'd just like to make sure that even if no matter what we do, that we make sure these are in fact solar ready.
So Lynn, I can answer only because I sat through the entire regional school meeting on the other part of the roof, is that a small part of the other part of the roof is solar ready rather than all of it. And they had to spend an extra amount. And the reason is that the roof itself was not designed to hold solar panels. And so they have to if they put a new roof on, they have to put holes in it and the weight of it. So it added cost for a very small amount of the rest of the school building. I'm not sure why. The contra example was the new school we're building, where the roof was right away from the beginning designed to hold the panels. So I don't know how much of that it's because it's on the second floor and weight bearing for the whole roof on it. And so I don't know the answer for the auditorium roof, for example, which is its own separate section, but we could get that. So MSBA won't pay for solar panels, but it required that this small section be solar ready. And they spent something like an extra $40,000, even though there's going to be nothing on it because it wouldn't cover enough of the building's need. So we can ask Shannon that this estimate of the auditorium roof was done by the same owner's manager that did the estimate over, so they went back up and looked at this. So that's all I can say to you is I don't know. It was too expensive to do it for the rest of the roof because it required a whole different roof, was the way it was explained to the committee. So Anna and then Sam.
So process-wise, Kathy, we have to wait for a request to come in from the regional school committee regardless on this, right? This is not something the town of Amherst can give a gift and dictate where it goes. That's correct, right?
If they, yeah, I think yes, and if they thought that we might be willing to do the whole amount, they might reach a different decision than they met a week ago.
Because that was kind of my question is if you had any more information about why, or if kind of trying to see into the future a little bit, what the regional school committee discussed around that possibility, if that's something that, you know, hypothetically knowing that that's in our budget guidelines as a possibility to fund more of this roof. So that's my first question. And then I just wanted to co-sign with what Jill said about maintenance, because I think that so often we look at the cost of a new project, and I won't cite any examples here, but we look at a cost of a new project, ignoring the cost to repair or maintain the existing status of the project, right? And so we don't often do a fair comparison. And I'd like to see that information. I'd like to know what that cost is of that annual maintenance. But again, this feels a little bit getting ahead of myself if the regional school committee is never going to even request this funding. And then that leads me to my last question, which is Sean, I just want to make sure I'm understanding kind of your perspective here. It's really interesting to hear your approach and Kathy's approach here. You're saying your preference is to wait and then reapply for a separate MSBA grant for the auditorium once it becomes eligible for an MSBA grant?
Yeah,
am
I mean, I
understanding?
would, and maybe where we're heading is that there's a request for information from the regional schools for different pieces of what people are
Yeah.
wondering. But I would want to know what has been done, what repair efforts have been done to that roof, and what else could be done. I totally hear what Councilor Brevik said, but there could be a middle of the road, more robust repair project that we could engage in that might buy time for it to get to MSBA. But I think the information I've heard so far is not enough where I would say, yeah, let's just volunteer and spend all the money on behalf of the other three towns as well. And I also would just caution there's a little bit of a slippery slope that we could be heading down, where we did this one time where we paid for the track and field more than our share. And now, you know, less than a couple years later, we're bringing forward another project where Amherst is going to pay more than its share. And I just worry, is that a trend if that keeps happening? Because I don't remember that happening very often prior to the track and field, and maybe my fault for bringing that forward. So I'll take you know, criticism for that if need be. But you know, that wasn't meant to start a trend. That was meant, the track and field is located in the town of Amherst and it's used by a lot of Amherst residents, and that was sort of the rationale for it. Where the auditorium is more a school function. You know, the town doesn't use it for town meeting anymore. It's, you know, it's not like people just walk into the auditorium the way they can the track and field.
Thank you.
Sam.
Yeah, interesting discussion. It seems to me that the potential, you know, what's the likelihood of any MSBA is very significant in terms of the time frame of it. And also hearing if there's a possibility of the other towns participating. Uh, those two items aside, which are major, it seems to me it's a question of the extent of the deterioration of the roof. How grave is it? In other words, over the course, if it's delayed, um, how much worse would it get? That's information that would be worth knowing, as Sean was alluding to. And incorporated in that is the maintenance, how much worse it would get, and maintenance are kind of two sides of that question. And the other item that came to my mind as this was brought up was what are apt to be the projected increases due to potential inflation. So I see two different issues, which sum up to not enough information. I feel that the question of the MSBA likelihood, the other towns, as well as you know, how bad is it? I heard Lynn's comment, but I would be interested in seeing information related to that and related to how bad it is. How expensive is a stopgap? Usually it's expensive, so that's where I'm at. More information would be helpful. I realize we're not
Yes.
making the decisions at this point in time.
Right, well, we can't anyway. I mean, we don't have, this is more the equivalent of a straw poll on, and I'm getting to the request for more information. Jill, Councilor Brevick?
I'll just offer two things. One, just on I think, I know everybody worries about the slippery slope aspect of these things, and so I hear you, Sean, on that one. But I think that, so two things. One, I do think it's a community space, or could be a community space used by lots of different groups. It's one of the few large spaces in town that people can use for free. It was where my kid's first theater performance ever was in The Lion King, and it was full of buckets because it was raining that day, and the whole front row. I mean, it basically, ruined it because it was really, really unacceptable. I think about, so then my just other point being that I do think there should be a different weight given to things that are health hazards. I mean, this is something that could lead to a lawsuit, or it's just as liability. And also we do care about the health of the children in our town, and leaks cause air quality issues and mold and just a generally unsafe environment for kids. So I do understand not wanting to go down the road where we're approving projects maybe like the track and field. I don't know enough about that project, but I nice to have things. I understand that, but I really don't think that this is something that falls into a category where we should be worrying about that type of thing. It also, I see like a nice pathway to getting done, something that should have been done a long time ago. And then so it's a little trouble. It's hard for me to hear, and this is I'm just being brutally honest, like let's get an assessment of something else. Let's go get, like a lot of red tape holding up something like this where, and as Mandy Jo and others have said, it feels like there is there is, an opportunity here to get this done while the rest of the roof is being done, to take care of a problem that is honestly an embarrassment. And that really should have been done a long time ago. If we can do that for a fairly negligible amount of money, to me, and I know I'm preaching to the choir to a lot of you here, so I'm not but those are just the points that come to mind, and especially as I heard a tremendous amount about this in campaigning and just in my work in the community. So I think anything we can do to move ourselves along on this issue, I think would be really great.
Sam and then Lynn, and then I have a way I think to move forward on this that I will suggest. Sam?
Yeah, I think Councilor Brezek brings up very good points, and I'm not sure how recently your kid's performance was in the auditorium, but it would be worth knowing.
Years ago,
Okay.
4 years
okay.
ago, yeah.
And there has not been repairs or improvements to it in that time, unknown. I'm not suggesting that letting a roof sit to get worse is a good idea. I was a contractor and I'm familiar with how things can become more involved. But what I was alluding to was that more information would be helpful. I didn't see anything specific in the packet for this evening's meeting, which could be helpful. And I absolutely recognize the how damages could get worse depending on the nature of the leaks, particularly in winter when ice happens. So that's a caveat to my request for more information. And the questions regarding the MSBA and other towns participating aside from whatever the graveness of the situation is, assuming the information projects that, is just a straight financial one, distinct from the urgency. So thank you, Councilor Breivik, for your, I don't know if it's anecdotal or personal experience with that.
Lynn,
Yeah, I appreciate the various comments. My comments are really more towards if we're going to seek additional information, here's some information I would like. So Kathy, why don't you?
well, that's what I was just doing. So I actually, the regional school committee chair asked to talk to me after we talked today. So, but we can do an official memo from us. So what I have down is, do they have a report? And there was one in 2022 that I know exists, but could they provide us the report that was done in 2022 that specifically looked at the auditorium roof? It would be one, how bad is it? Number two would be any repairs that have been done since, what is the cost of that they're spending now with annual or emergency repairs on the roof? Again, on this particular piece of the roof, how degraded it will be if they don't put major money in, if they have to wait 1 or 2 more years before any money or more. And then I was going to ask, how long did they have to wait when they got in the queue? Accelerated repair, you're in a queue with others. How long did they have to wait before we got to the point of approval for the big part of the roof? Just, just time. So those were the Gale, I think it's the Gale report. Sean, I think you got a copy of it, but anyway, it has a name. There was a consultant brought in to look at the roof. And then the maintenance person, Mike Gallo, knows what the current condition is. He's the one who spoke at the regional, but putting it in words on paper rather than just thing. And then how degraded it would be. So are those, did I get all the pieces of information that we would need that piece of information? And then how much of their not taking action was if and this is the part I don't know how to word, if Amherst might consider the full 1.6, how high a level of urgency do they think this project is? Would they say extremely urgent? Somewhat urgent? What's the level of urgency of this repair? So those are my 5. Because just so people know, the big issue is the other 3 towns. 2 of the towns exhausted all their free cash to do the current roof repair. They're out of money, so they're looking at an override. They're in an override, so they can't. As Sean said, they would have to do a town meeting, but the likelihood of them being able to do a town meeting on this one piece with a yes, they don't have the time anyway, so they just said can't happen time-wise. So Lynn, did I miss anything in terms of what we'd be asking for?
One of the things I would want to know is when would we actually be eligible for MSBA money?
Okay,
Because if it's 2 or 3 more years, then we need to take that into consideration.
so that's my MSB time. So it's eligible because you can't be in while you've got any active projects. So it's when eligible and then time to rise to the top of the queue.
Right. And then a second thing that completely, I mean, this is part of it, but, and this was really a question for Sean, and that is anywhere in our records or the records for the regional schools, is there an accounting of how much each town has paid towards the regional schools over the years? And the reason I'm asking that on a capital side, the reason I'm asking that is because it does look at this trend that, you've expressed concern about, and I understand the reason for your concern. The issue is that when schools are then abandoned, they are often then given back to the municipality. But in this case, it's for municipalities. And so it's not even clear who it goes to. It's not even clear to me where we stand on terms of equitable contribution based on our populations and so forth. So those are really my only additions. But thank you for this conversation.
Jill, anything to add to my list?
Just a
This
very
is-
small clarifying question. Since this was in the budget guidelines, can I just ask if were these conversations that were had at that time? Because it feels like it was, I'm just wondering if we're kind of rehashing something that maybe was already discussed at the time that it got into the budget guidelines.
It got into the guidelines because we knew the auditorium roof wasn't covered. And there was a report they said it was in bad shape. And at that point, the finance director did not have an estimate of what it would take. And all we knew is that it couldn't be included in MSBA's because it wasn't old enough. So it wasn't really even discussed at the regional school committee, the auditorium, other than unfortunate, they were told it's outside the scope of MSBA, so it wasn't how bad is it kind of discussion. That wasn't the focus. So it was an awareness that if we could, it would make sense to do the two at the same time rather than to have to do it set up once and then set up again for another part of the roof. So I see two more. I just want to say for Sean, for the regional school, the town uses the pool and we use the gym all the time.
Yeah,
so-
we do pay for that though. So
Yeah.
the region charges us for the use of the pool and for some use of different spaces. That's part of the work that the rec department's doing with the school to document all of
Yeah.
the different arrangements where we provide services to them, they provide services to us. So that accounting is still kind of being developed.
Right. So
but
I just think the integrity of the building is what we're talking about here, that you don't want to allow a central, it sits in the middle. Walls are shared with other pieces, so it's roofness that we're worried about. But yes, I understand what precedent this is setting. So Anna and Sam I think we're asking, what other information we need to get back if this moves forward at all. Anna.
Yeah, mine was really just kind of a response to Councilor Brevik's question. This was something that I think I ended up making the motion at council to add. It wasn't necessarily a huge, it was not something that was initially in the version voted by finance. It was in the version the council voted. So there was not significant or robust discussion. There was small discussion, but I would say we're not rehashing. We're going more in depth than what had occurred before, if that's helpful.
Sam.
Thank you. In terms of new information we could get, you referenced asking what's the current state of the roof. I'd like to add a subcomponent of that is how has the current state been altered by any repairs that might have happened in the last few years? In other words, has it been dramatically improved or not from repairs that might have been made? Because early on in our discussion here, there was a question about what would be the additional costs of delaying, and that's related to it. How much of an impact can a repair of some form take in order to buy time versus is it going to cost Amherst more 2 years from now than would have been contributed by the other regional schools? So I'm looking at the decision tree model at the top, of course, is just how grave is the situation, and a subcomponent is what impact has or might repairs of a whatever nature make, if that's already been discussed, from not necessarily a whole assessment from a study, but from what the manager the project person who's done it in the past, the internal opinions. Thank you.
So I've taken notes and I've got little scribbled notes on the side, so it's not eloquent yet. If it's all right with everyone, what I'll do is I'll draft a request for more information about the auditorium roof. I'll send it to everyone tonight. And if you would get back to me with any wordsmithing of anything I've met, then we can send it on to, and then the question of who, I think we send it to the chair of the regional school committee. It would be my thought of who it goes to. And then she, or the regional school committee, the people that will have answers to these are going to be the finance director and the facilities director. But they would have to be asking for, any reports they have. As you said, Sam, what kinds of repairs over the last few years have been made? What did they cost? What did they anticipate over the next 2 years having to put into it? And then Lynn's, when would they become eligible for MSBA? How long do they think they would wait? And I guess my final is how urgent do they see this repair? Given that, and that we would like something back in writing from them. And given this is all in the context, I just have to make it clear. I think it's in the context of the other 3 towns indicated strongly, 2 of them, no interest right now. So we're potentially talking about the Amherst being able to do it out of our free cash. And if we don't move soon, if this drags on, it won't be an option to do it at the same time as the rest of the roof, because they're going out to bid, and then construction would be June, July, and August. So that's the timeline on setup once for the roof. So the urgency is just to put a period on it, if it's going to move or not. Does that sound like I'll draft this memo from the finance committee with all of our names on it? You all respond to me just one at a time. Don't respond all to any edits you want, and then I send it off. Jill?
Do you want to add a date that you are requesting the information back by?
Yeah, I will. I was told that the regional school committee has another meeting on June, right? January 28th, January 28th. And so, it will be, whether the chair of the regional school committee can get the request for some of this information into motion before they meet as a full committee, just to say they're going to need more, or whether they're going to have to ask for it at that meeting is what I don't know, Jill. And what I would say, it would be good to have it by February 3rd that's the next time we meet, or February 2nd. So put a tight, some of this is they either have records of what we've been asking for, how much have they spent on repairs each year of the roof, right? And what's their best guess of what they're going to spend this year? So some of it is in their file somewhere. Does that make sense for a deadline? I'm saying the 3rd because that's the next time we meet. Then we don't meet again till the 20th.
Aren't we
And they-
talking about the use of free cash on the
So
second?
yeah, so no, for them to get the information back to us. I think you said deadline. So that's why I was saying
Yeah.
just get it back to us by no later than February 3rd. So we have this information.
We don't want it in advance of the council meeting on the second?
If they could, so I hear what you're saying. So would it be better to say January 2nd, which is when the council meets? Okay. It's just, it's a short timeline from when they're meeting. So we can ask, and if they say not doable, it's not doable, right? Does that, okay, Sean?
And just in terms of timing, I think the region needs to know whether there's the possibility of this being funded in order for them to develop their bid documents. I don't know if they necessarily need the funding by, but we'll have to go back and look at Shannon's memo and see exactly when. Does that say exactly the date they need the funding, Kathy?
Yeah, I'll look.
I assume it'd be before they sign any contracts, they would
It's
need.
before they sign contracts. So the arms roof memo. I have to look at it again. I have
Yeah,
it.
but that lays out the timeline of when they need funding approved.
Yeah, okay. It's in our document, but I'll have that, yeah. Okay. Exactly, and so, Sean, it was I think you can't go out to bid unless you've identified a source of your money, so that it was partly the bid documents, and Bob Parent on our side would be working with them, on the bid document. So I'll just look at it again. I'm sorry, I thought I had it open, but I don't have it open. I know where I can find it. any case, let's assume this tight deadline will at least alert them that we need the information sooner rather than later, and then they can get back to us. I mean, I see Sean is looking for the memo too. It got forwarded to us by Mandy. Sarah Beth sent it to Mandy. Everyone has it. Everyone who's on the council has it. And I have it in the packet, but for some reason I can't open it. So is that enough of a discussion on this topic? Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Sorry to prolong it, but it seemed like it was timely. The next is the quarterly reports. And when we posted the agenda, we didn't know for sure we'd have second quarter. So you have both first and second quarter posted. And Sean, I know you said you had another meeting at 3. Were you able to?
Yeah, no, we'll delay that. That's fine.
Okay, so I propose we'd go right to quarter 2, which is the most recently quarter report, and then Sean can walk us through what we're seeing. And then so he walks us through what we're seeing, then we ask questions or comment.
All right. Can you see it on the screen?
I can. Is that good for everyone?
Okay. So let me just, since we have some new members, so we provide this quarterly, usually within 30 days after the quarter ends. The end of year one sometimes takes a little bit longer, but now we're in the middle of the year, so we're trying to stay on that schedule. And we provide you a little bit of a narrative about the general fund and our enterprise funds. And at the back of the report, which is probably the most interesting, is a revenue summary and an expense summary. So I'm going to probably start there just to explain what you're looking at, and then I'll go back to the beginning. So through December 30th, 2025, these are different categories of general fund revenues. And the estimated revenue column is what we built our budget off of. And the actual year to date is what we've collected so far. And then remaining is just the difference between those two. And then percent collected gives you a sense of how we're doing relative to our target. Some revenues are seasonal, or they come in at certain times of the year. So because a percentage is high or low doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a great year or a bad year. It could just be the timing of when the revenue comes in. A good example of that is motor vehicle excise tax. So if you look at motor vehicle excise tax, we've only collected 13%. That's all stuff we've collected from prior years. The big commitment for motor vehicle excise tax comes out around now. And so we'll see that revenue start to come in. But so revenues are less, it's harder to tell by the percentage with revenues than it is with expenses, which are a little more evenly paced out. But some that we've talked about that I'll just highlight. So investment income, that's one where we talked quite a bit about that. So our revenues that we estimated were 500,000, we've collected 754,000 to date. So we've surpassed our target for the year, and that number will grow. But it's not quite as high as it was last year. So last year it was well above the target at this point, and this year it's hit our target already, which is great. So we'll beat that one. Licenses and permits, a little bit over 50%, so it's pretty close. That's another one that we talked quite a bit about during budget guidelines. What else? Any that are trending low. Pilot is a little bit low. That's a timing, and it's actually a journal entry that we have to do on our side that is more of a timing situation right here. So that'll be 100% collected pretty soon, and that'll be done for the year. But all in all, for the general fund, we're at about 51% collected, which is a little bit lower, or it's a decent amount lower than last year. So last year we were at like 54% collected at this time. Not the end of the world, but it may be a sign that we're not going to end with quite a large of a surplus as we did in the past year at the end of this year for revenues. And then I'm just going to go through enterprise funds on revenues, and I'll stop and see if there's questions on revenues. And then the enterprise fund, so we put the sort of the operating revenue, and then if there's any transfers, but these are all, you'll see these are all the operating revenues. And so these are really important to look at because these are based on usage and how much demand there is. And if we look like we're going to come up short, we might have to do something mid-year. They're a little bit below 50%, but they're actually doing better than last year. They're higher percentages collected through this point in time than last year. So all in all, these look like they're doing pretty well, except for transportation. And transportation is the one we want to keep a close eye on. We lost the parking lot in front of Town Hall. I'm glad Paul's not here. He doesn't want to hear me say that. But we've lost the parking lot in front of Town Hall, so we really got to monitor these revenues closely because that was, theoretically that parking revenue dispersed elsewhere, but it is falling a little lower than that 50% mark that we'd like to see. So that's revenues. Lynn, question?
Can you
Lynn?
describe what makes up pilot revenue?
Yeah, so this section of pilots in particular is enterprise fund payments. So the enterprise funds own lots of land, in particular water and sewer own lots of property. And that's one of those kind of indirect costs that they reimburse the town for, because enterprise funds are really supposed to reflect all of the costs associated with providing that service. And so the bulk of that pilot section, 90% of it, 95% of it is coming back from enterprise funds.
And where, for example, will the pilot that we receive for Hickory Ridge, will that go into that account or is that a separate account?
So
And
if it's a sort of a regular like a property tax pilot or a personal property, that will show up in our property taxes still. We have a few of those that still show up in property taxes.
okay. And where does the state contribution to pilot show up?
The state pilot is an assessment, so that comes in as a state and state aid.
Okay,
Like the payment for the land that they own comes in as state aid.
thank you.
Any other questions on revenues? Even curiosity questions for our new members, if there's anything just want to ask. That was a good time. Kathy?
So, well, I have a comment question. Investment income is running 50% higher than we'd budgeted for. So, which is, because it was a large amount for starters, is $250,000. Do you have any sense, just one of the things we found out for everyone on the committee that I didn't know before, this is not investment income on our stabilization, on our reserve funds. That investment income stays in those funds. This is investment income on money waiting to be spent on a capital project we've approved or some other pieces that is correct, Sean? Yeah.
Yep.
So if I take that, are we potentially, if you took it out for a full year, given that we've got more than, it's not going to go down, everyone. That is the amount we have. So
Yep.
are you at a point, because you know what the base is that the earnings are on, will we be running another 250,000 for the next half of the year?
Let me check with our treasurer. So a big portion of the investment income here comes through as CDs that expire. So it's a little bit about timing of when those CDs expire, when there's a monthly kind of our regular checking account interest that is more predictable, and then there's money that's in CDs that it's when it comes due. So in terms of how much more we'll collect depends how much more is still in CDs.
And then doesn't it also depend on what the base is? I know at one point we had taken money for, I think it was a fire engine or something, but they couldn't be delivered for 3
Yeah,
weeks. It
so
was
like some
sitting-
of that money is going out. So some of that money is going out the door, right? So we paid for the ladder truck, for example, but we also were borrowing money for that ladder truck in March. So we'll be reimbursing ourselves essentially for paying for that ladder truck this past month. So some of this money, this interest earnings is on borrowed funds for the school project, for example. Basically, unless the interest is required by law to be accounted for separately, which like for MBLC, the library grant, that's required by law, stabilization funds and trusts, those all are required by law. But unless it's required by law, essentially the interest revenue belongs to the general fund and is shown here. So yeah, capital projects is a big one, and we have some big capital projects going on right now, which has contributed to some of this higher interest.
So I know you don't like to look forward based on a second quarter report. So I was doing what might this look like in the end? And then My other two is the hotel motel, even though it's running lower, we're at almost 100% of what we expected. So, and meals, these are good news things. I'm not
Yeah,
flagging
those are
any.
good. Yep.
These are good news.
And
that-
these are all areas that we've adjusted up in our FY27 projections.
Yeah.
So when we look at the FY27 projections, when we come back in February, you'll see that the numbers that are in the estimated column, we've already looked at the history and brought those up. And some of what we'll do in February is, look at the new data coming in as well and see if we're still comfortable with what we put in FY27, or if we want to increase it a little bit or decrease it based on this information.
Okay, Jill, Counselor Brebeck, and then Sam.
Sean, I appreciate you taking the time to go through all of this, and this is maybe a newbie question, but in the nonprofit world, we usually have something that's called a budget narrative. Is that something that exists here, or something? I'm thinking about transparency and the public's ability to look at these documents and read them as well. So yeah, wondering if there's something like that maybe I've missed.
Yeah, the top of this report has, we don't go through every line, but we highlight some of the key trends or the points, some of the key points to look at.
But I mean, and for revenue, but also maybe more importantly for expense, I would probably have the same question. But yeah, something that did go through it line by line.
No, this is sort of the level of quarterly reporting that we've provided.
And Jill, I just point out it's also what a Northampton, particularly on quarterly, the end of the year one has a lot more information.
Sorry, just to clarify, I mean something more evergreen, I guess, is what I'm thinking about. And so I do
like something that just explains it once so that people know like what's in.
What items are in each of these lines.
Yeah, no, I don't know if that
yeah.
exists, but that's something we could create. And so let me take a stab at almost like a glossary or something, or an appendix that could be added to the back that just outlines what's in each category. That's something we could do.
Yeah, I just think when the question about the PL pilot line, areas where it's not glaringly apparent.
So you're saying just a definition of what's even in this line, so we don't have to ask it again. That'd be great.
What comprises each line? Yeah.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Cool. That's great. Thank you.
Sam? You're muted. You're muted, Sam.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Sean, and your staff for putting this report together. It's quite informative. A question, maybe not just related to this, but in a bigger scale. What do you see as the biggest areas of risk for revenue in the future? I'm assuming it might be state aid, but it's an assumption. Maybe that's beyond the scope of this discussion, but I'm just curious from your perspective, if you were to look at this and say, this is what I worry about. I'm curious if there's a particular segment that has enough potential variableness or uncertainty.
Yeah, no, it's a good
on
question.
The revenue, and then if you're going to do the expense, similar.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it really depends on what section we're looking at, right? So state aid, we haven't seen it drop in a long time, and we haven't seen 9C cuts in a long time. However, state aid is an area that, with sort of some of the, what's going on in Washington, and especially, some of the rhetoric around blue states and funding for blue states, that is an area that I'm concerned about. I'm hearing, for example, that the Affordable Care Act subsidies, expired, or some of them expired, and the state has already kicked in some money to preserve them. If that's on a permanent basis going forward, that takes away resources that might otherwise be used somewhere else. And then the state did come out with their revenue forecast, and I forget the exact percentage at this point. They I think it was around a 3% growth for state revenues, but they did highlight some big concerns as well in terms of what may be coming their way. So state aid is one that I'm concerned about. Economic activity in town is another one. If there's an economic downturn more broadly, that could impact and we have seen it in the past, that could impact our meals taxes, that could impact our hotel motel. And then related to that, and we've saw it this past year, and it was the first year in a while that we've seen it, is if our new growth starts to slow down. that really impacts how much our revenues grow as a whole, because new growth, adds to our property tax base more than the allowable 2.5%. So that allows our property taxes to grow at a faster rate. But along with that new growth is a lot of our building permit revenue, and our licensing revenue, which is, in this past couple of years has been really strong. If that starts to slow down and our new growth starts to slow down, it's kind of a double whammy. So I'd say, economic activity in town, new growth, and state aid are, 3 of the areas I'd be concerned about.
Thank you.
Jill,
Councilor Brevik?
Can I ask one more just sort of process question that a constituent brought up to me, which is it possible in these quarterly reports, and maybe this isn't the place for it, but to see prior year data as well, just for ease of getting like an at a glance sort of understanding of the situation?
Yeah, we do post all of these online, so there's a history of every quarterly report. Well, maybe not every, but there's a running list of all these quarterly reports. But I can think about how maybe we can put it into each current report. The thing I do, for example, when I do these reports is I go back to last year and I look at the prior year to see what percent collected were we through December last year and compare it to this year to get a sense of how are we comparing to last year, since I know, ultimately at the end of the year how we did last year. So maybe something like that could be added to these reports that would give you at least, 2 years time span to get a sense of how we're doing.
Yeah, just a thought. Thank you so much.
so it looks like you can go to expensive.
Okay. You didn't say expensive. You didn't mean that. That wasn't a slip
Yeah.
of the tongue, right? It's not expensive. All right. So this is the expense side. So very similar. This is the budget that the council votes, and broken down by department. What the budget is, how much has been expended. Encumbrances just mean that there's a contract or a purchase order in place, but we haven't spent the funds yet, but the dollars are earmarked for a certain purchase. And then, sorry, I got cut off. The second column from the left should say available budget, and then percent used. I think one of the rows got cut off. So again, here, this is more, you're more able to look and see how we deviate from the 50% level to get a sense of how we're doing. Not necessarily in every single category, but in most categories. So for example, town manager is at 48.9% spent, pretty close, pretty much on track with being at 50%. Areas where you see it lower, it's likely there could have been a vacancy. Finance director, we had a vacancy for several months, so we will not hit 100% in the finance director section. Accounting had a vacancy again. That's part of why they're trending lower. Some areas that are over 50%, it's because they might have a contract that it's a once a year, start of the year expense. So especially you see that a lot in information systems where a lot of their software renewals come up at the start of the year. So they're always trending a little bit higher. What else is in here? Scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the schools. So we've got the region. The region assesses us quarterly. So that's why they're exactly at 50%, because they've sent us 2 bills for the operating budget. And then the elementary schools, that's within our town budget. We track that so you can see where they're spent. They are typically a little lower than 50% as well, because they have 4 summer pays. So what they pay their teachers in July and August of this coming summer actually gets rolled back to this fiscal year. So they're typically a little lower than 50% at this point. Interfund transfers, you'll see that's 100% spent. That's what we send out for capital. So whatever gets voted for capital, we basically fund all of our capital accounts. It comes out of our general fund, it goes into capital articles, and then we track those capital articles and those projects. And then if those funds aren't spent for any reason, they get closed out and they can be appropriated again in the future. But yeah, so pretty, nothing stuck out too much, other than I did want to highlight that we do have 2 collective bargaining agreements that are not executed at this point. So there's a reserve for the outcome of that, but we don't know exactly what that outcome will be. And there will be a retro payment that will hit at some point when that does get settled. So just keep that in mind, that you might see some of these numbers jump up a little bit once that contract is settled. What else? Any questions? We're at 52.9% spent, which is a little bit higher than where we were last year. We were a little bit over 50% last year at this point. Lynn?
Lynn,
Are those town contracts that are not settled yet?
Yes. Yep. Those are town contracts. Yep.
Okay, and has the school settled their contract?
I haven't heard that they have.
Okay, all right, thank you.
so I have a couple, Sean, that are, sometimes it's a comment, sometimes it's a question. So on debt service, we're running 15% on debt service. Are there balloon payments that happen in third and fourth quarter? Is this, and that's question number one, that's part of that. And the second, does this include the debt service override that we've done for the Fort River School or the Amethyst Brook Elementary School? So what's in that three?
Yeah. So it does include the override. It
Okay.
does include the override. And the payment so the way that works is we have like a semi-annual interest payment and then an annual principal payment and interest payment. And so the big one that will be coming out of there is our bonds for the schools. We have 2 bonds that for the schools that come due in March.
Okay.
So we'll be making principal payments on those, which will use up most of that money.
Okay, and then on on fire, they're running slightly higher, 53%. Are we fully staffed up at this point? Last year we were running under because they had vacancies. Fully
Yeah.
staffed, yeah,
So last I heard, they were in the process of hiring somebody that would fully staff them.
okay.
So I think they might have had one vacancy for a little bit, but they filled many of them. So I believe they are fully staffed at this point.
So this may be indicating an issue if they're not fully staffed. Then on what was my other one? On inspection services, are we now fully staffed on that? So half a year ago, we were still looking to hire.
I think we've only filled one. I think we filled all the new positions except for one. I think they're still looking for a second inspector. I think there were 2 inspector positions related to the housing
Okay.
component, and I know when I last looked, one was filled, but the other one was not yet.
And for the rental fees, for the inspection fees that we're charging and for is that all under fees? It's just,
Yep.
it just
That comes in as revenue under the licenses and permit
does,
section.
I'm assuming the answer to this is yet. Do you track it separately? So if we said, what is the revenue from inspection fee and what is the revenue from,
Yeah, we're able to provide you that. So part of the new staffing structure is there's a sort of a dedicated administrative position. And that was one of the questions I asked when we were working on the budget was what have we received this year and what do you forecast for next year? So yeah, that information's available.
okay. I think those were my main, and then it's a minor comment and question on DPW on the traffic, streetlights and traffic lights. In the JCPC budget, we put $50,000 in for each of those categories. And
Mhm.
one was like changing out light bulbs or something. It was capital. Does this budget for streetlights and traffic lights reflect, well, it clearly for traffic lights, it can't because we put 50,000 in.
Yeah,
So,
this doesn't reflect anything capital. The only part in capital, anything voted in JCPC is part of that interfund transfer that I
okay,
showed you. That was 100%, because that's where that whole appropriation goes, and then it gets transferred out. This section is more for the operating piece. So, like in streetlights, a portion of our electrician gets charged there, and then there's
okay.
some line items in there. But yeah, this is not the capital money.
Because I just for others, part of the intent was opening up those lines was making sure DPW had enough capital money to actually install a new street light if we needed one, if one got knocked down, not just fix it. And then traffic lights, it's got a specific name, changing out the bulbs or doing something with the traffic lights. So there were those were new to the capital budget that we put in to help out on the DPW expenditure side. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure we track how it was to augment their operating budget. So, okay. Thank you.
So, in kind of summary, revenues are, we're over 50%. There, no major concerns there, but it's trending a little bit lower than last year. Expenses, we're trending a little higher than last year, but I'm still at this point okay with, department by department where things are at. But if anything changes with that, we'll let you know right away. And then on the revenues and the enterprise funds, the major concern at this point is the transportation fund and monitoring those revenues. Those have always been a little tricky, and those again are sort of economically driven, how many people come downtown and pay for parking. On the expense side, you'll see this here. The sewer waste, all the interfund transfers get done at the start of the year, so those are always spent 100%. But the rest of the operations, you can kind of track the spending. Water department's a little low. There's some annual journal entries that didn't get done yet that expense things like benefits and insurances and different things that we allocate out to enterprise funds. So that's why they're a little low. That we've got to do that. But overall, the enterprise funds on the expense side are doing okay. Again, no red flags. Parking expense wise is doing well. Really just a revenue issue with parking. Any final questions on the Q2 report?
I don't see any, and I just want to thank you for getting it to us. This is great.
Yeah, sorry, I would send it out normally more in advance, but saw it on the agenda and I was like, I can get this done for Tuesday. So
No, thank you very
Yep.
much. Yeah, it's nice to get a quarterly report this soon to when the quarter ended. So thank you very much.
Mhm.
So for the next time we meet, Sean, it may or may not have the closeout of the year with certified free cash. It depends on when you council meeting, correct?
Yeah, so we have to, so just again, I think I might have said
Yeah.
this, but some of this has to do with the road plan that is going to be brought to the council because part of our appropriations may or may not include some additional funds for roads. And so if it was just the appropriations and we weren't thinking about the road stuff, that might be able to happen sooner, but we were still working on what that long-term road plan is that the council has requested. So it'll likely come at the same meeting or around that date when we bring the appropriation. So that's why I'm thinking it's likely going to be the second meeting in February, unless there's some sort of emergency need, like the middle school roof. If you guys get the information back and it's an emergency, that could be taken separately.
Okay. And anything else? I mean, just so people know, normally I wouldn't have to ask this because I would have sat down with Sean to say, what do you think for the next 2 or 3 agendas was coming up? But since I wasn't chair, I didn't do that. And plus, he's been working really hard on behalf of all of us. So I figure he didn't need to meet with me. So just, is there any other, the other things that periodically come to us and we'll know them is that some, financial expenditure gets sent to the council and then it gets referred to finance. And that could be a large variety of things. So I just don't know what else we might have.
CPA will be coming up at some point. They likely have 2 more meetings. They're going to meet Thursday, and then I think they'll need at least 1 more meeting, which will be the following week. So that'll probably go to the council in February, and then be referred to finance committee.
Okay. Lynn?
This, it's really not for this meeting unless you want to address it, but Sean, you mentioned at the Four Towns meeting, the budget directions that departments have been given in town. And it would be useful, at least for me, and I hope for others, to understand what those budget directions are and why.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean,
Particularly the 10%
yeah,
decrease.
yeah, I can quickly speak to that. That's okay, Kathy, since we have
Sure.
a little bit. So we've asked departments, we've sent out budget development documents to departments. We've asked them each to identify reductions up to 10% of their current budget. We held 2 optional meetings with them to kind of explain, some of the factors that are why we're looking at reductions this year. This is a little bit different environment than where we've been in the past. Even last year, while it was a difficult year, I think this year could be worse. And so some of those factors that we explained to department heads are that within our own budget, we're looking at an 18% health insurance increase. It could come in a little bit lower, it could come in higher. We don't know yet, but at this point, we have an 18% estimate, and we have to start working on our budgets. There's the state aid component that we briefly talked about, which is state aid's unsure, and there's concern that that could, impact one way or another our funding. There is the schools and the fact that both of our school departments are looking at large reductions, and how that overall budget health could impact departments, library, and the town as well. And then what was the last thing? There's one other thing. Bear with me. Oh, and at the same time, we've been asked to bring forward a multi-year road investment plan and to take a look at the fire department staffing and come up with a plan to improve the fire department staffing. So, all these things are sort of trending in a way that there's not enough funding to do everything we want to do. And we've also framed it as, we're not going to make every reduction that is identified. We may not make any reductions that are identified. Maybe something moves in the right direction, but we have to plan for several years going forward. There's nothing that to me indicates next year is going to be substantially better than this year. So this is just a process we're going through that we haven't done in a long time that will give us information and help us, best position the town and provide services to the community.
Sean, let me just use an opportunity to say it's great to have you back.
Yeah, I've started all those meetings with not the budget year I wanted to start with, because it's not we haven't had to do this in a long time. But the department heads have been good, and we've also framed this. Paul, sets this tone. This is an opportunity to think creatively about the way we deliver services, and possibly identify less expensive ways to provide equivalent service or close to equivalent service. And there could be impacts. We've also been very clear to the departments, like, tell us what the impacts will be. The council is going to need to know that. And so, as we make these decisions.
Jill, Councillor Breivik.
Yeah, first off, just saying super grateful for that process. I think it's going to help, especially for new counselors, get a sense very quickly of where things are at from the perspective of the people closest to the work. So I'm just, grateful that's happening. I was just wondering, and correct me if I'm wrong, we were maybe throwing out things for future agendas as
Yep.
well. I would love at some point to have a session on the various stabilization funds that the town has currently, and I think members of the public might tune into that. And I've gotten a lot of questions around it. What are the uses? How do they work? What do they go to? And kind of just grounding us in an understanding of how those funds work, and then how we might be able to use them to get to a place of greater stability. So it's not, each year isn't this kind of frantic feeling situation for the town.
The other one we had that didn't happen last fall was an explanation of the ambulance fund, which is a big fund that we pay ambulance out of, but it sits there, and how does that actually work? So I can work with Sean on if the third doesn't have certified free cash, it might be an opportunity to do these. How do these work? We'll just figure out agendas so that we're not bumping into other things, so that we can have a good discussion on it. Yep. And it would actually be great, stabilization fund, because we could find out how much is in them right now, both how they work. The last number we had was in the budget book, and that was as of April 2025. Yeah. So, and suggestions like this along the way are most welcome. I mean, they often come up in a meeting, and then we try to figure out how to get them on an agenda. Lynn?
The other thing is, even though the council chose not to do any referrals on the charter recommendations, there were several that relate to
Ah, Jeff.
finance, and I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight that they may get referred to us because they would require changes. I'm not, and some of them, I think we have to check against state law.
Well, and one actually, I had asked Sean about, if you look at the budget book itself, the one that comes out in May 1st, I have long had ways of simplifying it, making it less long, and at the same time adding some tables that would be useful. So we might have either session on that or just periodically we've asked for finance committee people who stare at it, you know, what would be improvements to the presentation. And Sean originated the very creative thing we're looking at it, but that was now 8 years ago. So, we could, and the idea would be to save you all time too, so that something that would be pretty easy to do in terms you already have the extra detail. So that could be a session. And that was one of the things that came out of the Charter Commission, Lynn, and asking for a change in the level of detail and transparency in our budget. Yeah, so, okay, I have that on my list. That's great. So anything else? I don't see any hands. I want to thank everyone for what was a great first meeting in terms of substantive discussions. And I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And I will put that to a vote. Lynn?
Aye.
Kathy is a yes. Anna?
Bye.
Tom?
Aye.
Jill, Counselor Breivik?
Aye.
And Sam?
Aye.
We are adjourned. And for people who don't know the trick, if you just press down your space bar, it temporarily just unmutes you. So if you can't find the unmute button. So we are adjourned, and I'll get everyone a memo